My name is Kyle Cooper. I work for Todd Cooper and Company. We're manufacturer reps, and so we represent Lencore Acoustics, which is the sound masking line, and Mercury Notifications, which is mass notification or life safety. And then we do also campus safety products, which has a door barricade product. So it's with the turn of a handle, you can make a safe room in a second. So it's really, really cool. But what I'm going to tell you about today is how to brew a better cup of coffee. And the best way I like to describe it is the more control you can have over the brewing method, the better your coffee is going to be. And the way that you have more control is simply having the right equipment. I'm going to go through and show you how I brew everything, but I'm also going to show you all the equipment that I have. And for it is an investment. I probably have spent maybe like $150 on my equipment, which sounds like a lot of money. But if it's something that you use every single day, it's really not that big of an investment. And I can almost guarantee you, if you get into brewing coffee, you'll probably be spending more because you'll find that it's really fun, it's really interesting, and it's kind of a hobby. What you're about to see is about 150 bucks worth of equipment. So let me just go through everything I have. So everyone has drip coffee makers in their home. Drip coffee makers is when you put the beans in a large cone and then you pour water over it and then it drips down. It's also known as a pour over method. I use a pour over method too, but I use what's called a Chemex. It's a really cool design pour over coffee maker. It looks I think it's one of the best looking brewing methods out there. And some people think that, oh, this must be new. It's really cool. It's really sleek, awesome design. But it actually came out in the 40s. So it's a really, really old design. And so this is called a Chemex, and it makes about 2 to 4 cups of coffee. The only thing is, I'm the only one that drinks coffee in my home, so I don't really use this a lot, only when people come over. My daily use is a thing called an AeroPress. An AeroPress is pretty much a 1 to 2 cup of coffee brewer. It was actually invented in 2005, so it's really new. It's about $30 to $40 for a kit, and it's lasted me for about 2 years so far, and I don't expect it to break anytime soon. So it's actually really inexpensive, and it's really, really easy to use once you understand how to use it. And it's very clean, very simple, and the brewing method is actually really fast. So it's a quick cup of coffee. So I actually use this daily, and I'll go into how I brew. And I also want to say, if anyone has any questions, feel free to speak up. I can't read the chat. So just unmute your microphone and stop me if you have any questions. But so today I'm going to show you how to brew with my Chemex and then also my AeroPress. The next tool that I have is a scale. It's just a standard food scale. And the reason why that's important is when you're actually getting into brewing coffee, you want to measure out the liquid and the beans. So you generally want to brew for every 15 grams of coffee, you want to have 250 grams of water. And I know liquid is usually milliliters, but in the coffee world, people just keep grams to grams because you put your brewer on the scale and you pour it and you measure it in grams. So 15 grams of coffee for 250 milliliters of water is kind of the ratio. And you don't need to write this down. I'll actually send you my recipe on how I do everything after this. So just kind of pay attention and just focus on the concepts. So the way that you have control is you're able to control the volume and the weight of the beans. The next thing, that's one of the most important things, is getting fresh beans. You want to buy whole beans, not ground beans. So a lot of people don't know this, but ground beans start to go stale 15 minutes after they're ground. So yes, that big box of Folgers that you have, 15 minutes after that's ground, it starts going stale. Now they do have preservative methods whenever they manufacture Folgers. I don't know what kind of gas they put in there, but it stays fresh. But whenever you rip that seal off, it starts going stale within 15 minutes. Coffee beans, whole beans on the other hand, can stay fresh for up to a month. So when you buy coffee in the whole grain or whole bean, you want to look at the roasting label. So every reputable manufacturer, and I know this is backwards, but it shows a roasting label right here, and it was roasted on 9/24. So these are about 2 to 3 weeks old. The best time to grind coffee is about a week after it's been roasted because when you initially roast beans for the first week, there's off gassing and it might have an unpleasant flavor to it. So you want to buy beans that are about a week old after roasted. And what I'm going to be brewing today is actually a local bean. It's a local roaster. It's called Noble Coyote Coffee Roasters. I think they're in Dallas. I think they're off in like Deep Ellum, but they're really really good coffee. So check out Noble Coyote Coffee. The next piece of equipment that you're going to want to get is a grinder. So there's two different types of grinders you can have. You can have a blade grinder, which is really cheap for an electronic version. Like I think this one was like maybe like 20 or 30 bucks. Very cheap, very expensive, and it works. The problem is the grind is inconsistent. And what I mean by that is, let me take a step back. When you grind your coffee, you want all the grinds to be exactly the same. You want it to be uniform when you grind it. When you use a blade, it's inconsistent. So when after you've ground, you open it up and you look into the blade, and you'll see like dust of you'll see anywhere from dust all the way big chunks of coffee, and that's not what you want when you brew, because it won't extract well if you don't have it grind correct. So the solution to that is what's called a burr grinder. So this is what's called a conical burr grinder. You have conical and you have flat burr grinders. I don't know the differences between the two, only that they both are meant to grind coffee consistently, and they work. And you can also, one advantage of a burr grinder is if you open it up, you can see this attachment right here. You can adjust the grind. So depending on the way that you're brewing something, you want a different grind. So when you're brewing really quickly, you want a fine grind. If you're brewing really coarsely, or if you're brewing for a long period of time, like if you're doing cold brew that's overnight, you want a really coarse grind. So with the AeroPress, it's a quick brew. It's about a minute and 30 seconds for the brew. So you want a fine grind. With the Chemex, it's more of a 3-minute brew, so you want a medium grind. And these are all things you kind of learn over time. And if your grind is off, and as you keep drinking your coffee, you'll adjust your grind, try to find the sweet spot of what tastes good to you. And that's another thing is people want to know, like, what's a good cup of coffee taste like? And the answer is just like, if someone's asking you, what's your favorite wine? What do you like? If it tastes good to you, then it's good. But generally, coffee is going to be smooth. Depending on the roasting. It's going to be a very smooth coffee that doesn't have a lot of bitterness to it. Bitterness is a big sign that you're not brewing correctly. And so these are all the tools that I have. And I've talked about control before. And the way that you control it again is measuring out your beans and your water, having beans that are fresh, and then grinding them correctly. And I guess with the brewing methods, you can have control too, because you control how the water hits the brew. So with a coffee maker, you have no control of how the water is splashing down, how quickly it's being poured, all these other things. So you do have control with these brewing methods. One last thing before I start brewing. If you want to know about the different types of roast, a general rule of thumb is there's light roast, there's medium roast, and there's dark roast. So if you like coffee without any cream or sugar in it, you may want to look at getting a light roast. And the reason why is because the coffee enthusiasts call it like the purest form of coffee. So your light roasts are going to be the most flavorful. You're going to taste the most fruit. You're going to taste the most acid. You're going to taste whatever the components of that coffee is. That's going to be the most in a light roast. Medium roast is going to be kind of your breakfast blend. It's going to still have a lot of those flavors, those fruity flavors, maybe a little acidity, but it's going to have more caramelized undertones. But then you have your dark roast, which is going to be very, very savory, dark chocolate. It's usually not going to be very acidic. It's going to be a very rich coffee. And if you enjoy putting milk and sugar in your coffee, I would highly recommend switching to a dark roast. It complements it much better. So I drink medium roast. I sometimes I'll do light roast, but I generally do like a medium roast. But if you're really wanting that like pure coffee flavor, try a light roast. So let's get into actual brew. Oh, and I forgot one final thing that's really important is your kettle. So this is my kettle. Um, it's called a gooseneck kettle because of this gooseneck, and that allows it to pour correctly. And what's really cool about my kettle is it shows the temperature. And I know that shows it backwards, but it says 202 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature that you roast at is really, really important. If your coffee is too hot, it can make it really bitter. And if the temperature is too low, it may not extract as well. So a general rule of thumb is you want to brew at about 200 to 205 degrees when you're brewing coffee. And if you don't have a kettle, you can, before I had a kettle, what I did is I boiled water and I brought it up to a boil and I used a thermometer and temperatured the water. And generally, once it hits a boil, it's kind of at that like 200-degree area. So you don't have to have a kettle. It's just really, really convenient to just pour some water in it and then turn it on, and it's just good to go. I use filtered water when I make my coffee. It's only because my tap water doesn't taste very good, and coffee is like 99% water. So if it tastes fine to you with tap water, keep using it. But I would try using filtered water a few times and see if you like your coffee better with that. So that is all my equipment. Does anyone have any questions about my equipment that I have?
Hey, Kyle,
Yes.
the gooseneck deal, are you actually brewing coffee in that or are you pouring water onto?
Yeah. No. So this is only for pouring water. Yeah, I'm not brewing inside of this at all.
So are you
Um,
getting like an instant coffee or something? Or
No, no. So I have these different types of brewing methods. So this Chemex is what I'm going to brew out of, and I'm going to use this AeroPress as well, and I'll show you all how to use it.
okay, okay.
And I think something this kettle is also really really nice because if you like tea, it can be used for that as well. And then also if you like bake, some baking recipes call for like very specific measurements of temperature. See, I don't know, I've used it more than just for coffee, so it's a pretty cool investment to get.
Hey Kyle, what brand is that? I've never seen that kettle before.
It is a Bonavita, Bonavita, Bonavita.
Okay, cool, thanks.
My grinder is called a Hario, Hario. It's a hand grinder. It, it I hate hand grinding. It sucks. But you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. So this thing is about like 40 bucks or 30 or 40 bucks. You can get an electronic burr grinder, but I would be hesitant to get anything that's under $150. Electronic burr grinders are very expensive. So I wouldn't get Encore, I forgot the name of it. There's like an Encore burr grinder that's really, really nice. That's on my like, Amazon wish list. Uh, Wink, wink, Todd. Anyways, so let's get into brewing. So I'm going to turn the camera, bring this down, unless anyone has any more questions about the equipment. Let's move this up, get everything out. So I have my pre-ground coffee here, not Folgers pre-ground, I hand grind it, or ground. Got my scale. And first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do the Chemex brew. So I place the Chemex on my scale because, like I said before, we're measuring everything. And I turn my scale on. So Chemex comes with these filters. And this is what you're going to put your coffee in. So I open up the filter. And I put the filter in. And the first thing that you want to do is you want to pour hot water on your filter. Because if you don't do that, it actually puts a paper flavor into your coffee. So what you do first is you pour hot water into the filter. And I want to say that this is going to seem very complicated and it's going to go really fast. But it's really just because I've done it so many times. After you've brewed this 3 or 4 times, it's kind of just like second nature. But I know it's normal for people to not follow because it's going so quickly and the terms are kind of. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to wet the paper. And now we want to measure out 30 grams of coffee because we're going to make 2 cups of coffee. So I'm going to measure out 30 grams. Okay, and that's 30. So what you want to do is you want to make it flat, and then you want to take your finger and make a little hole in the center, kind of like a little well. What we're going to do next is we're going to bloom the coffee. So what that means is we're going to pour a little bit of water on this coffee to have it start blooming. And what blooming means is you wet the grounds so that the grounds can kind of get pre-soaked so they can extract the coffee better. So grounds, before they're wet, has a lot of CO2 in it. And what happens is when hot water hits the beans, they release that CO2. So what you want to do is just wet the ground slightly for about 45 seconds, and then you want to start adding water. So we're going to add a total of 500 grams of water to this coffee. I'm going to bloom with 60 grams of water for 45 seconds. Then I'm going to pour half of the water into the brewer, and then after that, I'm going to wait about 30 seconds. I'm going to slowly pour the remaining water into the brewer. Now, one thing you want to do when you're brewing coffee in something like Chemex is you want to keep the water level the same as long as possible. And the reason why is you want it to have, you want the temperature of the brewing area to be the same. And as water drops, the temperature drops. So you want to slowly add water so that the volume in the actual brewing area stays the same the whole time. I'm also going to do a couple of swirls and also maybe take this stirring device and kind of knock some of the grounds off while I'm brewing. So let me go through it and I'll show you what I mean. So I have my watch on. I'm going to press start. I'm going to pour about 60 grams of water. And then at 45 seconds, I'm going to start pouring the remainder of the water. And I'll try to bring the phone in. It's probably going to be kind of hard to see, but let's just start. So I'm going to click start on my watch, and I'm going to start pouring. And I'm pouring like in a swirling motion. Okay. So what you want to do is you have 60 grams of water in there, and I'm just kind of moving them around, moving the coffee around, just trying to get everything soaked. We're not actually brewing right now, even though you can see that some coffee is falling right now. We're not actually in the brewing method right now. So, and this is what it kind of looks like right now. Kind of just like a sludge. So now we're at about 45 seconds, and I'm going to start pouring. So we're brewing at 500 total of grams. We're going to pour up to 250 grams of water. So here we go. And when I'm pouring, I'm just kind of pouring around the edges a little bit, and then I'm hitting the center. I'm really trying to soak all the grounds. Okay, so we're at about 250 right now, and you can see we're about right there. So now coffee is starting to fall. Coffee is starting to drain down, and I want to try to keep that level, that volume that is in here the entire time. So I'm going to slowly add water as it starts to creep down. I'm slowly adding water to it because I want to keep this temperature as high as possible while you're brewing. So now we're at 360, and this total brew time, it's going to take like 3 minutes total to do this. So you kind of I add water, every 10 seconds or so. Let me show you what's going on here. And what you can also do while this is brewing is you can do two things. You can take it off and you can swirl it to try to knock off the grounds that are on the side. Or you can take your, let me pour a little bit more. We're at about 450, so we're almost there. Or you can take your stir and kind of just give it a little bit. You don't want to mess with it too much. There's a nice bed of coffee that's at the bottom. You definitely don't want to agitate it too much, but you definitely want all of the coffee grounds to soak. Okay, so now we're at, this will be 500. All right, so now we're at 500. I'm gonna put this back on. Bring this back up to heat. And so I'll show you what's going on here. You can see the coffee slowly moving down. This is the chamber it falls into. So this is just like a drip cup, just like any other coffee maker. It's just a what seems like a more complicated method. Is this hard to do, or like, does this take time? Yes, it absolutely does. Do I do this every morning? No. Sometimes, you got to make a quick cup of coffee, and you don't have time to grind everything. I have pre-grinds. I have Folgers in my house. I'm not ashamed to say that. But sometimes, if you have the time, and you really, we're all working from home. You're working long days. After lunch, it sometimes is nice to just go and make a cup of coffee for yourself and kind of take your time and maybe be mindful. I really enjoy the process. I think it's a really fun hobby. So this is still going. It's almost done. And we've been brewing for it's almost 4 minutes now for 2 cups of coffee. And let's see here. Maybe if I turn the light on, you can see we're pretty much done brewing. And, usually it's a nice like puck. It kind of looks like a nice flat bed in the center. This is not too bad. What you don't want to see, which I messed up on, is you see these large grounds that are on the side. You'll always have little grinds around the edge. But these large grounds are not what you want. And the way that you can relieve that is just by taking your stir and kind of just going down the edges of the filter while you're brewing. So let me go throw this away really quick, and I'll show you the finished product. So turn this up. All right, and there you have it, 2 cups of coffee. Now, does anyone have any questions about the Chemex version of Brew?
Kyle, I do have a question. I don't know if it's specific to the Chemex, but is that ratio static? I think it's 15 grams per cup and 250 grams of water.
So yeah, it's 30 grams per 500 grams of water. And the answer is no. That is my recipe. That's a recipe that I copied from someone that I found on the internet. So, but I would say that it's a really, really good place to start, and then maybe adjust your recipe as if you want it to be a little stronger, or if you want it to, you can tweak the ratios. But I would say that's a really, really good place to start.
Cool, thanks.
Sure. Okay, so the next method I'm going to show you, and it's going to go really quick, is my favorite way of brewing, and it's called the AeroPress. So this is the AeroPress, and I'm going to show you how I make it. So what you do is you have a cap, and then you have 2 sections. And what you do is you take the bottom, you put it on top. So this is the plunger end of the AeroPress. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the coffee in here, we're going to brew it, and then I'm going to plunge it through a filter. So the way that we set it up is we put the plunger in here, and I put it on top of my scale because we measure everything. And I'm going to measure out 15 grams of coffee. So we had our 3,500. ratio. It's a little different with AeroPress because you just pour it up to the top. There's really no measurements, but you still want to use the same coffee grounds per cup, usually 15 grams per cup. So I'm going to measure out 15 grams of coffee for this. So I turn my scale on. I pour about 15 grams into here. Then what I do next is, here is the cap of the Aero filter, or the AeroPress. I put the filters, this is just manufactured by AeroPress or some other one. I put the filters in here, into the cap. I pour hot water onto the filter so you don't get the paper taste. And you learn to not burn your hands. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset my timer, and I'm going to bloom this coffee for 30 seconds. I'm going to pour the coffee up to the top, and then I'm going to bloom the coffee. I'm going to stir it, wait 30 seconds. Then I'm going to pour the rest. I'm going to fill up this chamber with water, stir it, and then in a minute 30, flip it over, push it down, and then it's done. So let's just do that really quick. So let's bloom. And you're pouring about 30 grams of water when you bloom. It doesn't really, you can measure out when you're blooming with this. I usually don't. After I've done it a few times, I just eyeballed it. Started my timer. We're going 30 seconds on this bloom. One thing that you can know when you have fresh coffee is when you look into it, and I'll show you what I mean, you'll see bubbles, and that's CO2 being released. When coffee's stale, it doesn't release CO2 anymore. So that's one kind of visual cue that you know that it's not good. Okay, we're at 30 seconds. So now I'm just going to pour the remaining water. I'm going to fill up this chamber. All right, and I'm going to stir. Let me show you what the foam, what the bubbles look like. Fresh coffee will have kind of like a foam on top of it. And we're brewing for about a minute 30 seconds, but I've been talking for 15. So we're just gonna wait a minute and 15 seconds. So essentially we're done. We're just waiting for this to brew for a minute, 15 seconds. And then I'm gonna flip it over, I'm gonna plunge it. And that's why I like the AeroPress so much, because I'm the only one that drinks coffee in my house. The Chemex is really nice, it's really fun. It is kind of a lot of work. So if you're the type of person that just drinks, 1 cup at a time, you can make 2 out of it. It's just kind of hard sometimes to divide it up, but you certainly can. You would just use more coffee grounds in it. And so what an AeroPress is doing is you're doing an immersion brew. So all the beans are completely submerged in really hot water. And then also it uses pressure to extract the coffee. So it's a mixture of immersion and pressurized extraction. That's why it works so well. What the end product is actually a coffee concentrate. So you definitely don't want to plunge this out and then take a sip. You want to plunge it and then you want to add some water to it because it's a concentrate. It's almost like an espresso Americano mix. So we're at a minute 15. Let's move this over. We take our cup and we're going to just flip it over. And then you slowly want to press for it takes about 15, 20 seconds to press. So I'm kind of just letting gravity do the work. I'm pushing down a little bit. You don't want to just slam it down. Slowly pushing, slowly pushing. And when you get towards the end, you're going to hear it. You're going to start hearing hissing. And that lets you know when you're almost done brewing. All right, and I'm at the end. So now what you do is you have this little puck of coffee. You come over to your sink, you take your cap off. I'm gonna go over to my trash can and just push this puck of coffee out. And then you just rinse it off with some water. And I clean mine with soap and water every 3 days. And then the final thing that you do is you can see in here, it looks like a really low cup of coffee. like it's a concentrate. So what you have to do is I ran out of water, but I'll just do this anyways. You actually have to add water to it. So what I generally do is I just pour it up to where a normal cup of coffee looks. I don't really measure it out. You can. I would recommend measuring it out to find the exact perfect amount you want in there. But really all you have to do is just pour it up and just kind of taste it and find out where you like it. So that is my demonstration. That is my breakdown. Does anyone have any questions?
You might have to come over to my house and do that again. That was really helpful, though.
Hey, Kyle, there's a question from Susan Bell in the chat box. It says, can the Chemex version be used for cold brew as well?
I think you can. You could probably Google it. I would recommend getting something like this. I'll pull it out. It's called a toddy, TODDY. It's a cold brewing system. And it's really, really easy to work with. I don't really like cold brew that much, but I have it just because I wanted to get it. But look up, it's a TODDY, even though it's backwards. Look up the toddy cold brewing method. It's really, really cool. I would highly recommend doing that. But I'm certain you could do it in a Chemex if you really wanted to. It just might be kind of messy.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think the summary is just a little bit of investment in some equipment, and I think your coffee will be even better. Now, the one thing you maybe want to recommend doing, let's say you think this is all really cool, just buy some fresh beans. Buy some fresh beans and grind them when you're using it with your coffee maker. You'll probably see a significant difference. Like, try to avoid the Folgers. Even get like the blade cutter. Just try some fresh beans.
Yeah. For anyone on the session this morning, Kristen has it recording, so we'll be able to provide the recording for you in case you weren't taking notes along the way.
I have a recipe that I can send everyone to, so.
Yeah, and Rich, I thought maybe we'd upload it to the Cornell
Sure.
LinkedIn page too, if you want to edit out my chatter in the beginning.
I can see a whole podcast in the future for Kyle Cooper.
I know, Kyle. What's next?
I don't know. You know what? If you really want to, I can bring my brother-in-law on. I mean, he's an actual coffee expert. And he can talk about things, way more interesting than I can. I just know the basics.
So maybe this is a part one.
I would love to do it again.
All right.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kyle. And thank you, everyone, for joining. This was so fun.
Sure. All right, y'all. Well, have a good day.
Okay. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kyle. That was cool.
Sure. Bye.
Thanks, Kyle.
Bye-bye.